Hi, seventh graders. Today we are going to talk about uh, lesson two, the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. So you should have your guided notes, and let's write down on your guided notes the I can statement. I can explain the rise and fall of the Minoan and Mycenaean civilization. All right, so first let's talk about the Minoans. So the Minoans were actually the very first civilization to flourish in Greece over 4,000 years ago. So if we think back to what was happening during that period of time, that was the same period of time when we talked about ancient Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. All of these civilizations all over the world were starting to develop. And the Minoans were developing here on this island of Crete. So you can write in that island of Crete right here. Now, what we know about the Minoans is really just pieced together with archaeology, so things that archaeologists found, remains, that type of thing, and then the writings of the ancient Greek historians that came a little bit later. Okay, Minoan myths. Minoan myths really played a large role in Minoan culture. And at the time, they didn't consider them myths. They thought these things were actually real. For example, a big Minoan myth was there was this king of Crete. His name was Minos, and he was thought to have this labyrinth under his palace. And you can see a picture over here. It is this like circular maze thing, and it was thought to protect the palace. Now, the big myth part too was that there was a half man, half bull who helped to guard the palace as well. And that half man, half bull was known as the Minotaur. And again, so these Minoan myths were kind of passed down through history and they remain today. That's a very famous one. And that's how we kind of know a little bit about the Minoans. Okay, trade. Trade was huge for the Minoans. They were expert sailors. So just put that they were sailors, and they really grew wealthy from trade in the Mediterranean. So that was a super important part of their success. And they were able to trade olive oil and wine and cloth and pottery with Greece, people from Greece and Egypt and Spain. Now, they would trade because obviously they didn't have a whole lot of things, but they would trade their goods for raw materials like gold, pearls, and ivory, which then enriched their trade even more. All right, they did have cities in Minoa. So in Crete, the palace at Knossos really dominated the area. And this is a likeness of what it may have looked like. What was really unique about it is it was once home to over 20,000 people. So circle that 20,000 in your guided notes. 20,000 people. So it was really more like a city than it was a palace. And it was the political and ceremonial hub for the Minoans. So this is just where life thrived for that civilization of the Minoans. All right, but most civilizations fall, as did the Minoans. And this happened despite the fact that they were wealthy and they had a thriving culture. They fell, or they became no more, around 1500 BCE. Now, it was due to two factors. First of all, there was some sort of natural disaster that happened. And then after that natural disaster, they're not quite sure, historians aren't quite sure what, but there was also an invasion by someone called the Mycenaeans right after that happened. So whoever remained on this island was kind of decimated by the Mycenaeans afterwards. Now, the Mycenaeans would then become the dominant civilization in Greece after this. So go ahead on your guided notes and just make sure you circle that the Mycenaeans took over the Minoans. So I guess the next question would be, who are these Mycenaeans? Well, they are settlers in Greece, and they settled there around 2000 BCE or BC, specifically in this Peloponnese Peninsula. So I want you to circle that on your map, the Peloponnese Peninsula, but they also had some of mainland Greece, so you can circle that area too. And then they had some of the islands as well. So some of the lands across the Eastern Mediterranean and Greece. And then finally, they had Crete around 1500 when they invaded. So those areas are all where the Mycenaeans thrived. They did travel more and further than the Minoans had, so that's kind of why they were able to take over. They had more experience with travel, had more experience with battles because they had done that. All right, so the Mycenaeans. They communicated. They were actually the first to have a written language in the area of Greece. So they created something called Linear B, which was really an idea taken from the Minoans. And this is what it looked like. It was pretty complex. It is considered the first language, the first written language in ancient Greece. And it was finally translated in 1952, like nowadays, 1952. And that is because it was so complicated. And that does give us some little hints about what went on in ancient Greece. All right, so now it's time to think and respond. Take a moment and you want to answer this question. We've learned a lot about writing and how it's impacted groups prior to this. How might writing have impacted the Greeks? So pause, answer that question using a couple of sentences, and then return when you are finished answering. All right, so let's take a look at the city of Mycenae. Mycenae was the center of the Mycenaean civilization, and you can kind of see what it may have looked like. This is a historian's kind of vision of what it may have looked like. It was built high on a hill, and it was surrounded by these walls for protection because the Mycenaeans had been through battles. They knew what it needed to protect them. So thriving city, protected, that was the city of Mycenae. Now again, the Minoans fell, the Mycenaeans also fall. So another group came around. In 1100 BC, it came to an end. They were overthrown by these Dorians, another group, and this group was pretty much focused on war. And they had better resources and better weapons, so they were able to take over the Mycenaeans. Now, after this, Greece would fall into an era with little history for the next 200 years, and that was known as the Dark Ages because we don't really know much about it. There wasn't writing, there wasn't a whole lot left behind that historians could find out about. Now, keeping that in mind, you're going to think and respond one last time. Whoops. With the fact that those two civilizations rose and then they fell again, do you think or expect that there's going to be this pattern or theme of growing civilizations that are destroyed by a more advanced civilization? Why or why not? Think about maybe what we've learned in the past, or think about what we've even learned in this video. When you're done, share your video notes with your teacher and then move on to the next activity.